Shout e do shidime, she Ashley White inishia. Klizaflen initially ma ide shkijni bashishin tosodi deshinele. Oh my gosh, excuse me guys. Hello everyone. My name is Ashley White. Thank you for coming and joining. It's great to see all my relatives. My name is Ashley White. I am many goats born for Coyote Pass. Please do not tell my grandma I butchered my clans. That said, I'm a proud Ghanaian woman. I'm also the education and training coordinator here at the Johns Hopkins Center for Indigenous Health. I'm so happy to share this space with you all today, and thank you for coming. On behalf of the Johns Hopkins Center for Indigenous Health, we would like to welcome you to this event, Medicinal Tea with Meenakshi Richardson. This is the last of our events hosted by the center throughout November in celebration of Native American Month. It is a good day to be Indigenous. This is a virtual event, so for those of everyone joining online, all participants will be placed on mute with cameras off, but we encourage you to participate by adding any questions into the Q&A or chat box. At this time, we would like to invite you to share which lands you are calling from in the chat. If you are unsure or do not have access to the chat, we still invite you to take a moment to reflect on our knowledge, the land, or the Indigenous peoples of your region in your own way. Before I introduce our presenter for today, we would like to begin with our land acknowledgement here. We humbly acknowledge that Johns Hopkins University is located on the traditional and contemporary homelands of Indigenous peoples. Our campus resides on unceded lands of the Piscataway Susquehannock peoples. We recognize the enduring presence of more than 7,000 Indigenous peoples in Baltimore City, including Piscataway, Lumbee, and Eastern Band of Cherokee community members. As we gather together virtually from across the country, we acknowledge the Indigenous peoples of our homelands. We are all on Native land. Together, we acknowledge the history of genocide and ongoing systemic inequities while respecting treaties made on this territory as a step towards reconciliation and strengthening relationships with Indigenous peoples. We give thanks to the past, present, and future stewards of this land and respect all tribal nations' sovereignty and right to self-determination. We aim to hold ourselves and the university community accountable to tribal nations. Now, folks, without further ado, I have the honor today of introducing our presenter, Dr. Meenakshi Richardson. Mia is a citizen of the Haliwa-Saponi tribe and a current faculty member at the Center for Indigenous Health. I'm now going to turn things over to Mina to provide her own introduction and begin her presentation.
Meku, greetings and pilahuk. Thank you very much. Many thanks for joining and being a part of this time together. And what a good day it is to gather and to share our gifts and good medicine and to learn from our plant relatives today. I thank you, Ash, for the introduction and all of the team for organizing all these beautiful centered events this past couple of weeks. And as Ash said, I am a citizen of the Haliwa-Saponi tribe, and I'm also of Indo-Fijian descent. My mom is from the Fiji Islands, and we also have Asian Indian history, ancestry. And I'm really grateful to join here and to just share a little bit more about my own learnings, the teachings that I was gifted, and kind of the processes and ways in which we can really be in good relationship and kinship with our plant relatives and the medicines and gifts that they offer. The name gifted to me by my mother's father is Meenakshi, which actually translates to fish-eyed or fish eyes. And it actually means to see the world through a different perspective. And that's what my grandfather hoped for me. He passed and transitioned before I was born. And so I'm really grateful for that namesake. The name gifted to me by community is Minosains, which means little moon. And with that, the spirit of the woman, right, through the moon, and to recognize during my naming ceremony that the moon moves the tides and the tides don't move the moon. And so really centering in who I am and the medicine of my ancestors, the people, the matriarchs in my family, to really ground me in the relationship with all of our kin. But you can call me Mina. And so I grew up in the Pacific Northwest. So as in terms of the lands in which I'm on here today, on the Multnomah, the Wasco, the Cowlitz, Clackamas, Clackamas, bands of the Chinook, Tualatin, Kalapuya, Molala, and several other intertribal and urban Indigenous folks here in Portland, Oregon. Many of us who have and continue to call the lands alongside the Columbia River and Willamette Rivers home. In the Portland metro area, there are over 400 different tribal communities represented in the urban Indigenous community. So I always like to highlight that as well. So I was born on the East Coast. My tribe is in North Carolina, in Hollister, North Carolina, Halifax and Warren counties. But I was born in Virginia. And when I was young, many of my family members, especially on my mother's family, immigrated from Fiji to Vancouver, British Columbia. And so we transitioned and moved to the Pacific Northwest. I grew up 45 minutes outside of Seattle on Puyallup lands. My dad still lives in the Smileshine community there, and my mom lives in South Tacoma. And as I said, I spend most of my time as a guest on the lands of Coast Salish peoples. And within the last like 5 years, moved to the Portland area. And so I also identify as an urban Native person, right? And then also as a tribal citizen, and also carrying and uplifting the ancestors and multi-ethnic indigeneity that I carry as well. And so I want to honor you for being here and want to encourage you to be reflective and think about who you come from, the people you come from, right? The teachings that they have shared with you. I'm sure that as we're moving through, there might be memories that come up for you, like maybe memories with your relatives, right? Or teachings that you've had, or certain plant medicine memories. And so I encourage you as I'm sharing a little bit more about my journey and how I've come to this place and offering my learnings. Um, Please do share in the chat if something comes to mind, or if you're like, oh, I've used that. I've like definitely heard about the ways in which we, if there's alignment in what I'm speaking to, essentially, that would be really lovely to hear. Or if there's a medicine that calls to you, or if there's a medicine that's been on your mind and heart lately, please do share that. I wish we could be here in person, drinking the tea together, but welcome to my home, Zoom style. So let's dive into it. So I think the one thing that I'm really hoping that folks can ground in is really nurturing our relationships with our plant relatives, right? And to learn more about the medicines and teachings that our plant relatives offer to us. And so my relationship with plants can be described, and the way that I've been taught is very concentric, meaning that with our plant relatives, we share breath, right? We receive oxygen and we share carbon dioxide, right? All of this is connected in the way that we connect with our culture, our land, place, people, and our more than human relatives. And what we're focusing, kind of thinking about here is with our plant relatives. And so I think about my time as restorative, as connection to culture, as connection to the people, a place, my ancestors, the knowledge systems and cultural teachings and traditions. That is my collective responsibility, my relational responsibility and call to uplift, to nurture, and to support in our continuation as strong Native people with our knowledge systems. And just as we always have been. And I kind of think of it as my time. People describe, well, how do you feel when you are spending time with plant relatives? And I say, oh, it's like R&R, like rest and rejuvenation. But actually, the R&R that I'm talking about is remembrance and returning. That every time I spend time with our plant relatives, I'm remembering, right, our relationship and our kinship across thousands of years, right? The love that our ancestors breathed into us to be here today, no matter where you come from. And so this returning to the land, this returning, from the busy lives that we might have, and just spending time on the land and spending time with our friends, right? And I am community trained. So, what does that mean? That means that I was taught by my aunties, my mom, my relative, community members, other traditional practitioners and healers over several years growing up. It means that I've engaged in different types of capacities around medicinal healing, plant medicines, and I'm a trained prevention scientist. And my background is also in public health. And so, this is a way for me to not only ground in my traditional ways as a Native person, as an Indigenous person, but also as a just a woman and a person connected as a part of this like world and ecosystem and as a human being, right? And so, as I said, these are the people that have really nurtured my knowledge, and I want to share a little bit about them and these amazing programs with you. And this might resonate with you as well. And so, please continue to share in the chat. And I know that at one point we'll be able to like hear and see a little bit more about what people are sharing. Um, but this is my mom, Iris, and my aunt, Okanichi. And this is like a beautiful representation, this photo of how I grew up. So, these two beautiful worlds, two beautiful ways of life and being that are really interconnected and have very rooted similarities and grounding and values in connection to the land and place. And also rich traditions around traditional medicines and plant medicine. And so these are beautiful teachers. This is my mother's parents. Satya and John, and this is my grandfather who named me after Meenakshi. And this is my relative here, Itai Jeffries, who's Okanichi Saponi, and is also a traditional practitioner and an amazing, amazing two-spirit leader around two-spirit health and programming, and has written some books around plant medicines and connections to our teachings around our two-spirit relatives, and those that carry medicine and offer medicine. And this is my grandfather, Tyler Richardson Sr. He grew up in Nashville, North Carolina, and grew up on farmlands, and really nurtured our understanding around food medicines and our connection to our food, right? And the couple me, I'm hugging a tree in the forest on the land. This is my husband and I. His name is David. His people come from Norway, as well as Sweden, and we go and visit family there. His sister, brother-in-law, and then our niece and nephew live in Stockholm. And most recently, this is our trip there, and he actually works in forest restoration, riparian waterway healing for our salmon relatives, and is a botanic technician with the city of Portland. And so it's really lovely. We'll be sitting and eating and nurturing ourselves and like sharing all of these knowledge systems. It's really, really lovely. But I wanted to speak to this picture specifically because all of this beautiful greenery that you see here in this photo is all ramson, which is wild garlic. And we harvested some of this garlic and we cooked up reindeer and lingonberry, and it was the best stew. So that's like a picture and a food and plant medicine memory that I wanted to share with you. Um, and in terms of some other kind of uh, training, I also received my master's in public health from Bastyr University in community health education. And Bastyr University is known for its natural medicine and sciences and clinical training. I actually got into the naturopathic program, but I decided to kind of go more public health and prevention science route. And so, my love for plant medicines and those sciences around healing have definitely been a part of my journey for a long time. And really finding ways to integrate traditional medicines and cultural significance around plant medicines and teachings into the current work now. And I also had a lot of connections with traditional healers and practitioners in a clinical setting when I spent some time at the Seattle Indian Health Board, which is an urban Indigenous federally qualified health center in the Seattle area, serving diverse Indigenous folks. And within their coordinated care program and integrative Indigenous informed systems of care, traditional healing and traditional medicine practitioners, healers, and apprentices were at the center of care plans for our relatives. And so I worked very closely, directing community services within the Department of Traditional Health, working with providers and practitioners. And I learned a lot around clinical healing and clinical herbalism during that time from a lot of practitioners in that space. One of whom is Melissa Meyer, who's a Tsimshian First Nations tribal member, is a clinical herbalist and is also community trained. And from that time, she had also, when she transitioned from the health board, started Rose Island Farm. And this is their logo here on Puyallup lands. And they are a community education farm that focuses on plant medicine and plant healing. So they also have rabbitry and teaching classes. This is like plant first aid. This is like making medicines with your aunties and cousins and uncles and family friends, gardening. There was even some woodworking. And so received a lot of training through a lot of the programming there. And then also working with local programming here in the Portland area through the Indigenous Traditional Ecological and Cultural Knowledge Program with Portland State University, with a lot of their work around integrating iTech and our traditional Indigenous ways of knowing and being around community health, land management, forestry, plant medicine, food sovereignty, gardening. And so all of these ways in which we are reconnecting with the land and revitalizing our traditional health systems for the well-being of all of our relatives. The Prismid Sanctuary is a sanctuary space for people of color in the Portland area. And we have baskets and brunch every other Sunday that's hosted with Prismid. And they're learning more about basket weaving with cedar, so processing cedar, processing and stripping willow bark for basket making. And we know that willow is a really strong medicine as well, willow bark, and has had a lot of implications around our current Western systems, especially if people know about aspirin, right? And pain management through willow bark. So had the opportunity to learn from teachers around plant medicines and basket making as well. And then recently have started some more formalized training in a program that's specifically for people of color and from an Indigenous and Black perspective around plant medicine and plant medicine teachings through hood herbalism. And so I'm really grateful for that to kind of start more towards some clinical training practice as well as I'm trying to integrate this into our work and look at other funding opportunities through the National Institutes of Health and other funding mechanisms to support our learnings and teachings around plant medicines and our relationship with them and prevention for several health outcomes. And so this is rooted in relationality for me, right? Also being a member of the Portland All Nations Canoe family and supporting around integrating Indigenous traditional and ecological knowledge and our connection with water and land and intertribal cultural connections. Um, and so all these folks, all these people, my community, the people that claim me, have really supported and walked alongside me in growing my relationship with our plant kin. And so it's just an honor and privilege to be here and to share a little bit more about that, who I am, where I come from, my ancestors, the people who nurture me and teach me. And I think it's also this collective responsibility that we have to share this knowledge in a good way, right? And I know that many of you probably here in this space have had similar paths or also practice and work clinically as well. I'm not a physician. And so these are teachings that I know that have worked well within our community and have been very effective for our relatives. And it's about weaving together diverse teachings and knowledge systems, right? I think in this practice, just as I've shared, is that when I introduce myself, I want to honor my ancestors from both sides of my family, right? Because all of teachings have really informed my relationships with plant kin and medicinal properties around our plant relatives. And so weaving together, Indigenous ways of knowing and the sassafras tea that we drink right at home in within our tribal communities, but then also the like Ayurvedic medicines and the influences of living on the island in Fiji, right, from my family members, the camphor oil, the ashwagandha, the turmeric, right, the kava root. And processing kava root to make grog for healing and stress properties and to relieve stress and anxiety. And so I just wanted to share a little bit more about that and the framework and the people and who informed my knowledge base here. And please do continue to share. I see people popping things in the chat, which is like really exciting. So thank you for sharing and thank you for your grace. I don't know, I'm not a chemist, I'm not a pharmacist, I'm not a, physician, as I said, but these are the teachings that I've gathered that have worked really well within our communities and we know work well for our communities. That's the thing too, is that this is medicine, this is medicinal knowledge that we know is rooted in our healing practices as Native peoples. And as much as possible, really advocating for this work to become more knowledgeable, that we have education within our communities so that we feel supported and that we have capacity and encouragement to learn more about our relationship with plants and to offer immense gratitude to our plant kin for offering their medicines and gifts for us for our own healing. And I don't really like it when people say complementary medicine because I'm like, well, that means that you're centering one type of medicine and everything else is maybe not a capital T with truth. So that's my view. That's my lens. So these are some teachings and some books and resources that I've also referred to and centered in, and I think are great points for people if they're looking to learn more about, the scientific knowledge and teachings of plants and plant medicines. And, some of them are kind of ethnobotanical, some of them are direct experiences around practices within specific communities. This one in particular, the kinship collection, my favorite one in that collection is Partners, because this is a compilation of stories, of conversations, of like heart and love, and focusing in on plant intelligence, right? The intelligence, the sovereignty, the person and peoplehood of water, of our more than human kin, our plant relatives. And there's a particular interview in here with Monica Galliano, who actually is a marine biologist and studies conscious ecology and really specifically talks about the emotional connections and intelligence and of plant medicines. So specific plant species that she works with, right? And plant consciousness. And so there are just beautiful examples here. I'm trying to learn more actually about fungi and mushrooms, right? The flower of mycelium. And so kind of starting around that path and trying to learn from practitioners that have a lot of knowledge around that. I encourage you to learn more about the plants of the region that you're in. So as I said, a lot of the blends that I think about in the way that we are engaging with our plant medicines, there may be medicines that are here in the Pacific Northwest that may not be on the East Coast and vice versa, right? So thinking regionally about like responsible harvesting and sourcing and knowing that there are different types of species of some of the plants that we're even going to be sharing and talking about today. And so I would really encourage you to learn more about the place. And I think that that's really important too, right? Connection to place. And as a guest on these lands, people think about, well, how are we acknowledging connection to place when maybe you're not near or on tribal lands. And I think that a great way to feel connected to place is to learn about the people, the more than human relatives, the kin, the waterways of that place. And I think that that's really important too. So as much as possible, as I'm, connecting with our plant relatives and blending teas, and making certain plant medicines, I will integrate and interweave um, plant medicines and work seasonally. So just some offerings here. So what I share is a blend of what I've learned, what I've gathered, and then also some of these books. And so that's where I'm coming from today. So this is like your works cited for today's conversation. So let's talk plant medicine. So our communities, right, as Native people have engaged and connected and rooted in relationship with our plant medicines for thousands of years, right? We continue to do so. And we know that our plant medicines can offer specific healing properties. And similarly, we know that we have, as Native people, we always continue to grow. And we, along with our plant relatives and more than human kin, also adapt to ever-changing ecosystems. And so, similarly, as I mentioned, diverse like connections and interweaving of ways of knowing and being, we also know that there were plant relatives that were brought to this land, maybe without their own consent. And so we know that there are kind of changes and relationships around native plant species and plant species that maybe are not from here, right? And that doesn't mean that there aren't medicines and properties that we can learn about from them. And so, as much as possible, really engaging and learning more about plant medicines. Plant medicines are very powerful. There are things to consider, right, when working with plant medicines. Some parts of the plant may be best for certain use, for certain practices or specific cases around types of properties around the medicines. So, for example, some medicines, if consumed too often, might be toxic, right? And so, really think about the medicines that you're taking and the medicines maybe that you're harvesting, what part of the medicine that you're harvesting. I'm still learning. I'm always learning about different plant medicines and relatives, and I definitely don't know about every plant out there. And so, definitely take the time to learn about a particular medicine, as well as the influences and impacts around coordinated care that maybe you're already receiving, other medications that you might be taking. So please take those things into consideration and consult with your healthcare and clinical providers, your nutritionists, your other practitioners. Maybe you are working with a traditional healer around that. We want to make sure that we are being safe for our plant relatives and then also safe for ourselves and our well-being. So that's one thing that I want to emphasize. And then also respectful harvesting and sourcing, right? I know that among our communities, we're so diverse. We have so many different languages, we have so many different spiritual practices and ceremonies around, our connection to land. And in terms of respectful harvesting, I was taught to always thank the four directions, to offer tobacco. In some practices, I know people have shared with me that they offer a song, that they sit, right, in meditation and sit in silence, right, and really listen in on the time spent before harvesting. We never take more than what we need. And we also are cognizant around the environment and the health and well-being of the environment in which the plant is living. And also sourcing. So sometimes don't feel well enough in my spirit to blend medicines for myself or others. And I think it's really important to know how you are and where you are in terms of your wellness. And I think that all people, wherever you are in your wellness, that we can ground in our relationship with medicines. But sometimes I have experienced throughout my journey, which I'll share with you, moments that I needed immense healing and time for rest. And that's when practitioners and other community members and healers in my life and who have crossed paths with me offered medicine. And so I think I also support other herbalists and practitioners, right? Some of whom, one, for example, is Two Spirit Medicinals. I really love their blends, their salves, their hydrosols. And they are a Karuk member, and they live here locally. So in Southwest Washington, Portland, Oregon area. So there are also probably several practitioners and herbalists that might be local to you, that you can also support. We are entering into the winter season, so we don't have as very many fresh or fresh dried from previous seasons plant medicines. And so if I haven't harvested and dried and processed myself, I also work with other apothecaries and local practitioners here in the area. For example, there's Clary Sage Apothecary, who's ran and operated by a Boricua woman. And so really wanting to support, right, our local healers and practitioners and where we source, where our medicines are coming from, how they've been taken care of really matters when we're blending medicine, right? And so I also think about intention and language, and I think through this process, through training, and I'm sure we've all been here, is around learning and unlearning. So maybe unlearning some terminology that maybe is extractive, right? And I even catch myself and find myself doing this, right? In all transparency and honesty, and I offer this as a way to ground ourselves and maybe a framework and language around rooting and relationality with our plants, especially when we are trying to learn more about the medicinal gifts and properties that our plant relatives offer for us. And so, maybe you've heard things around like plant uses, right? And this, I think, really implies this one-sided relationship between people and plants, right? Where people are essentially centered, and we're only thinking about the healing of people, not necessarily the reciprocal connection, right? That breath, right? That concentric breath that we are sharing among different beings. And that there's this belief that plants are available for us at any given time. And I think that when we're responsibly harvesting along our traditional protocols or cultural protocols, we're acknowledging that our plant relatives are offering themselves, right? Waiting for consent, spending that time with our relatives, right? I think is really important. And so I like to describe it as like these medicines, right? To really describe this reciprocal relationship with plants that offer to an entire ecosystem, not just humans, right? I think about the role of our sky relatives in supporting with seed distribution, right? I think about our insect relatives that pollinate, right? So there's all of these beautiful things that we're considering that they're offering gifts to an entire ecosystem, and gifts are offered back. Um, and so we care for the environment for our collective well-being. And so we're invited to listen, learn, and observe with plants. And we're asking for their permission and guidance with the gifts that they offer. And so, what are some ways to prepare plant medicines? So, I wanted to share a couple practices that I've taken a part of, some things that I'm learning as well. So, decoction, for example, is focused on boiling down, so like plant elements or plant parts down into thick and like concentrated consistencies. So, think like broths, syrups, or pastes. I remember my grandmother, she would make this blend, and still to this day, my mom and I are trying to remember what was in there because we would feel horrible one day, like so bad, so ill. And then we'd sip this broth, and the next day, good as new. We were great. And so we're trying to remember what plants, medicines were included in that decoction. But also during this time, right now I have some rose hips out in the front. We have some rose hips here. And so we'll be making some syrup, rose hip syrup. Um, there's also tinctures, so plants that are steeped in a preservative, like alcohol or apple cider vinegar or vegetable glycerin. And if you are allergic to soy, you'll want to think about different type of glycerin. But I prefer apple cider vinegar for preserving with tinctures because of the probiotic properties. And we're thinking, and with alcohol, it's drinking alcohol. Um, and then there's also infusions, right? So this is like where we're soaking plants in water over a period of time, resulting in like this beautiful steeped liquid to be taken orally. There's poultices, which is a thick paste made from plants that are soaked in water. So we're thinking kind of like plant material that can be applied externally or topically. Oftentimes they're used to prevent or extract or draw out infection. So yarrow is a really good poultice that can be made. For example, and we'll talk about yarrow here in a minute. Salves. So those are oil-based balms, so made out of like coconut or olive oil or almond oil, and prepared with beeswax, and then are infused with plant material, plant oils. And then you have washes, and washes are kind of a blend of plants infused and steeped in water externally. Oh, I should be there. Or they're submerged or soaked. So think like baths, hydrosols, for example, which is steam distilled plant essences or a plant essence that's kind of like put in a spray. So that's really known for like facial sprays and spritzers and things like that. But today we're talking about infusions. And so, for those of you that like to get technical, we have this slide, which is an offering because with our infusions, we're talking about like our herbal teas, right? And sometimes people refer to them as like tisanes, but these are not caffeinated tea blends, right? So, steeping of various plants, herbs, flowers, spices, roots, fruits. And they can be blended with other kind of like quote unquote true teas and which we're thinking about in terms of coming from a very specific plant. And these teas contain caffeine, and you're brewing mainly just the tea leaves. And there are different types of, or different variants of these plants, like white, green, oolong, black, pu'er. But kind of where I kind of um, blend is kind of more around like herbal, non-caffeinated teas. And so fresh or dry. And this is, I think right now, right? I think it's based on like seasonally for sure. But if you have access to fresh plants, and harvesting and sourcing in a good way. Fresh is great, adds moisture, oils. Sometimes there's higher vitamin content, nutritional value with fresh plant relatives. You might get like a richer flavor depending on the plant. Great for those decoctions, those poultices, cold pressing, distilling. And then we have dry, right, which is great for storage and extended kind of like virtue in these different ways that plants can share their medicine with us. Great for tinctures, hydrosol, salves, like I was saying, great for infusions and teas. And you're still going to get those vitamins and those nutritional values. Maybe they just won't taste as strong as fresh. But this is an example here of calendula flower, which I really love in terms of like salves, really, really hydrating for the skin. You might find in like the skincare products that you might have come across that calendula oil or calendula flower or like flower essences might be really popular because of that rich moisture. And the skin just feels so like fresh. And so happy to share skincare routine as well. I really do love making masks and blends and salves as well. So here are a couple, I'm going to go over a couple of the plant medicines for the blend that we will be kind of working with today. And so corn silks. So these are the part of the corn husk, right? These beautiful silks here that offer so many gifts. And this is corn silk dried. So you'll see depending on the color of the silks will depend on the like variant of the type of corn. But in terms of medicinal properties, orally, really, really great for anti-inflammation, digestion, urinary tract health. There has been a lot of knowledge around like blood sugar and blood pressure, digestion, and hair health. When I was going through a stressful time, my hair was falling out. My hair was falling out. And a teacher of mine told me to drink nettles and corn silk. And even some horsetail as well, which is a plant that grows near some waterways. And also great for skin support, so skin irritation, so making salves, also for like eczema or rashes and some minor cuts can support with wound healing too. In terms of the taste, it's kind of mildly sweet, creamy, tastes like corn. Really awesome. So chamomile is also another medicine that is used in or offered in many different blends around the world. But the plant part that's often used is the flowers. So the flowers are really, really lovely. I find that the greens are quite bitter. And so when you may be drinking chamomile tea, often dried and ground flowers. And so, in terms of the medicine offered, stress relief, sleep aid, great for digestion, anti-inflammatory, great for respiratory health, mouth washes too. So if you have any like cuts in your mouth, really good to blend an infusion and kind of like swash that around and can help kind of activate some faster healing properties, great for skin support as well, preventing bacterial infection, eye irritation. I know there's also been some studies, which there haven't been robust studies, but I know that there have been a few around um, chamomile capsules to support immunity during chemotherapy, so around oncology care. Tastes mildly sweet and floral, so really yummy. Stinging nettle. You can blend teas with the leaf, stem, roots, antioxidants, high in vitamins and minerals. So as I was saying too, when my hair was falling out, great with iron. I'm also anemic. So great with a lot of different vitamins here, magnesium, as well, supporting muscle health. So anti-inflammatory, great for allergy relief, urinary and prostate health. Also great for cooking. So like rubs, baking, cooked greens, kind of tastes like kale or spinach. Um, and then topically, great again, skin support, blemishes and oils. So also great for skincare. So the taste mild, grassy. And then skullcap. So skullcap is a medicine that has really supported me when I was going through um, a that time of healing that I really needed. And a practitioner shared with me that skullcap can really support us in our grief. And I know that during this time, there's a lot of changes that we're experiencing. There's a lot of stress and anxiety and uncertainty, and that we are experiencing collective grief, right? And I think that this is a really strong and powerful medicine, not only supporting, stress relief, sleep aid, headaches and cramps, but it also is really grounding for our spirit and when we're moving through grief. Um, Great for skin conditions, wound healing, blemishes as well. Also mild, grassy, kind of bitter sometimes. So yarrow, so also the leaf, stem, and flower, can be blended. Great for immunity, respiratory health, digestion, blood pressure, muscle and menstrual cramps. Also for menstrual cramps, raspberry leaf or cranberry bush bark can also be really, really helpful. Great for skin conditions, wound healing. Also tastes mild and grassy. Rose. So rose is a really beautiful medicine. They offer stress relief, antioxidants, vitamin C with the hips, with rose hips. So that syrup that we'll be making will really support with immunity, hydration, and there are so many different types of rose. So this photo here is a wild rose in this region. Much of the rose, like today, will be damask rose, which is used in a lot of kind of like commercial products, I guess you could say. Um, but buds, hips, metals, bark, roots can be blended. And then we also have like stress relief here, highlighted, skin conditions, great for baths as well. Floral, sweet, tart, and I even might say kind of citrusy, depending. So those are kind of those flavor profiles. So this is kind of an infusion blend ratio that I've found to work well. Um, we have our base plants that are kind of at around 40% of like a specific blend that you're making. So maybe in a specific jar, for example, I'll do like 40% of a base plant. So thinking about my nettles, chamomile, corn silk, oat straw, which is really, really nourishing and hydrating. And then the supportive plant. So the supportive plant that you are kind of really engaging with their plant medicine, right? Or the medicinal properties that you'll need to support you. And so in this instance, you can use skullcap, right? If you have headaches or, processing grief during that time. Echinacea for immunity, for example. Dandelion root, which is really, really good for digestion, upset stomach. Calendula for hydration. And then you have like accent plants. So lemon balm, which is a part of the mint family, lavender. This is lavender here. Red lavender. And then rose, and then also roots or fruit. So ginger, also great for digestion, nausea. Um, and so these are kind of the blends. And these are things to consider too, is that some plant medicines may not kind of blend well together. So for example, I wouldn't blend like chamomile or valerian or St. John's wort because they all have kind of like sleep aid sedative properties in many ways. And also, if you consume too much of that, there might be some other risks, right? Or complications with other medications that you might be taking. So again, before you're blending, please do speak to your providers around if there might be any things to consider with your current care plan. Um, and I know that there are practitioners and organizations like a couple weeks ago, I was actually speaking with Ashley at Native American Community Clinic in Minneapolis, and she was saying out of the traditional health department there that they've worked closely with the pharmacy team so that those common medications that clients and relatives might be taking, things to consider with their plant blends or plant medicines. And so I know that that work is being done. And so definitely speak with your practitioner and your coordinated care providers to see what's best. Um, and yeah, so then we'll blend. And I think you can also blend and prepare with tea bags, right? So sometimes you may not have fresh dried chamomile, but chamomile is widely available at like grocers. And I definitely will blend, and I think that that's great. And I would just encourage you to again ensure that the plants can be blended safely. Um, and then we'll take about 1 tablespoon of the blend with like 8 ounces of water. And then I'll usually steep between like 5 and 15 minutes. And to be honest, I like keep the blend in there for a long time. And then I'll get like a couple cups going or a big pot. Or even putting some of the blends in a bath is really, really lovely too. And so I wanted to share a bit of beautiful news around traditional healing in this particular area in the Pacific Northwest around practitioners and healers and coordinated care. And this like QR code to the left was an article that was shared in Native News Online, which is like a local Native Native news outlet. And this was published in early October around, Center for Medicare, Medicaid services and the implementation of Medicaid reimbursement around traditional healing practices in 4 states. So in New Mexico, California, Oregon, and Arizona, I believe. Um, but this is great. This is great news. And so also really supporting a lot of the work that we know, right? We integrate cultural knowledge and teachings in our care, and to be supported in that way and not having to share traditional knowledge, and that can really support self-determination in the way that we're providing care. And in Oregon specifically, there's a specific waiver around traditional health workers and community health workers as well. So I just wanted to share some great news there. And there's a link to the Oregon Health Authority model if you're interested to learn more about that. Um, and then I also wanted to just highlight some plant medicine, ecological knowledge, and heart work that I've been a part of. Not everything is shared here, but one piece is around the Native Collective Research Effort to Enhance Wellness, which is a part of the National Institutes of Health, and the Helping to End Addiction Long-Term Initiative, and is a beautiful, beautiful network of tribal and native serving organizations, and academic institutions and Indigenous scholars that are working together to focus in on healing and cultural-based practices, and blending of different ways of knowing to support substance use treatment, healing, prevention, as well as pain management. And so during those sessions, we have a reflection room to offer medicines, and I've just been grateful to be able to blend teas and to support that space for us when we're taking care of ourselves as we're supporting our relatives. There's some work with Portland Harbor Community Coalition around the Superfund site here and the impact of our fish relatives, subsistence, as well as our plant relatives along the water. And then also working with the Portland All Nations Canoe family. And there's also some amazing work that I get to be a part of with Fond du Lac community, and with Melissa Walls with the Indigenous Food Systems programming, as well as Tara Madry, and really centering around what nourishment means for the Fond du Lac community and really uplifting traditional food systems and cultural food ways to support our relatives there. And I'd hope that continued work can be supported through plant medicine and community education, and really bolstering the science around the strengths and medicinal properties around plant medicines for our health and well-being. Let's make some tea. And then while we're making tea, I also think it would be great, Ash, if we could like hear about people, what people are saying in the
Yeah,
chat. If there are
yeah,
any thoughts, like plant medicines that people are saying that they really enjoy, things that resonated with them. Um, yeah, let's do it.
yeah. Let's go ahead and do that. You read my mind, Mina. Okay, so I did flag a question here, and a question is, well, first of all, they say great work. Could you provide resources for someone who is interested in being certified or trained in plant medicine?
Yes. Okay. So I recently decided to kind of move towards certification. So in terms of like of a strong practice, I in board certified practice, naturopathic practitioners are trained to become board certified, as well as board certified Ayurvedic doctors, and acupuncturists, right? So in terms of herbalism and like clinical practice in the United States, the only certification is through the American Herbalist Guild, and that's through to become a registered herbalist to work clinically as a clinical herbalist. And so that's some training that you can receive for like a formal certification, and you need like 800 hours of education. You have like 400 clinical hours. You're working with maybe a traditional practitioner, or you're in an apprenticeship program, for example. So that one is you submit, and it takes like a bit of time, and you have to have case studies, and you've been working with clients and relatives and maybe some patients for a few years and then you can get that certification. But in terms of practicing herbalist, aside from that registered certification, um, then there's like community trained practitioners, and then it's like, are you claimed by community? Are you trusted in community? All those things. So, but I am working towards a clinical certification myself. So I just want to share a couple things here. So we have skull cap, what we talked about before. We have our rose buds. We have rose petals, which taste different to me, I think. And then we have nettle leaf. We have corn silk, our chamomile, and then yarrow. And so, as I shared before, we have some corn silk here. I was hoping to find some fresh dried corn silk from this past season, so like between May and September, best time, but didn't have access to like fresh dried. So this is from like a previous season. So we'll have some corn silk here. So this is what I'm thinking in terms of base, right? To have corn silk, chamomile as base. So I'm gonna do a 40% base here. Some chamomiles. Some nettle. The corn silk is ground. Yes. And there's even some roasted corn kernels in there too. And oftentimes if you buy corn silk, they're kind of ground up dried corn silks if you buy it in the tea bags. Some yarrow. This is going to be a bigger blend. And so next time I come to Baltimore, I'll see you next. I'll have some blends for you to try. And then we're thinking about, so I added some yarrow and some skullcap because that's the supportive medicine, right? That I'm kind of focusing in on here. And then accent, because the skullcap and nettle might be bitter, depending, sometimes the skullcap can be bitter. So I'll put a few rose buds. And then a few rose petals. Then I'm going to mix. Look how pretty. Beautiful.
Wish I could smell that, Mina.
Smells so good. Smells so good. And I like to use, sometimes you can buy those like metal strainer, I don't know what they're called. Those like metal strainer things that you can like put in the bottle. I like these unbleached reusable tea bags. Um, and again, I have a smaller cup with me today. It's about 8 ounces, so I'm gonna get a rosebud in here. This one's the kind of a small spoon. So again, tablespoon is great for 8 ounces. It's probably about a tablespoon. Then I'll cinch. Have some hot water in here. Then we'll let that steep. And we made an infusion herbal tea blend.
Amazing, Mina. Yeah, I wish we were all able to have some tea here.
I know, I wish all 100 plus of you were in my living room and we could all have this tea together.
Yeah. Mina, I think we have time for just one more question here. I do see one from Matu here.
Mm.
And Matu asks, have you seen any similarities between Ayurvedic medicine?
I have, yes. And that's kind of where I see like, and similarly with like Chinese medicine properties as well, where there is a lot of work being done around like stress management, right? And like root medicines. And so there are, like I was saying, you can use kind of focus in on like nettle roots as well. But the root properties around like ashwagandha or kava, for example, have really, really amazing properties. And we know that within a lot of our native communities, we've also kind of focused in on healing properties around plant medicines and roots. So I see that as well as like mushrooms too. So in Chinese medicine, actually Bastyr University is doing a larger study around turkey tail mushrooms to support immunity during oncology care. Um, so yes, a lot, a lot of beautiful considerations, and I'm still learning. And I want to shout out to the Great Plains Hub and also Manarda, who's doing a cultural sharing session event with our Great Lakes team today as well this afternoon. Wish I could be there. And also has several years of working with plant medicines and connecting with plant relatives and offering some of their knowledge around spruce and pine, I believe. But wish I could be there with you all for that.
Thank you, Mina. And also, it looks like folks are hoping you write a book, or do you have any thoughts about writing a book?
That would be cool. Yeah, I feel like there's a lot of beautiful books out there from ethnobotanists and herbalists, and thank you so much for that inspiration. Yeah, maybe I will consider this. And when I get deeper into my clinical training, I think that that would be really lovely in integrating that into our work.
How exciting. Well, when you do, Mina, let us know, and I'll be happy to send a blast to everyone here who registered.
Oh,
Well,
yeah.
folks, yeah. This concludes our event for today. Thank you all for joining us, and again, a special thank you for to Mina. Mina, make sure you read all the comments here. Thank you for sharing your knowledge with us. Folks, I do want to plug our center's YouTube channel that is at JHCIH, where you can find this video and also our past Native American Heritage Month events and other valuable presentations, webinars from our center. That is it, everyone. Happy Native American Heritage Month. We'll see you next time.